My name is Claire Morgan, and the moment my husband raised his glass at Thanksgiving dinner and said, "To a new beginning, without you," I did not gasp, cry, or drop my fork. I smiled. Not because it did not hurt, but because by then, I was ready. Before I tell you what happened next and why that smile changed the direction of my life, let me ask you something. Have you ever been publicly dismissed by the one person who once promised to protect you? If that question feels familiar, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Stories like this matter because so many endings happen in rooms full of witnesses. Daniel and I had been married for 14 years. From the outside, we looked solid, a comfortable home, shared holidays, polite smiles in photos. Inside, the marriage had been thinning for years, stretched by his ambition and my quiet habit of making things easier for him. Daniel liked order and appearances. He liked being admired for his generosity, his calm leadership, his steady hand. I liked peace. Somewhere along the way, my preference for peace became permission for him to decide everything. The signs did not arrive as explosions, they arrived as edits. Conversations shortened. Decisions were announced instead of discussed. When I asked for time, he offered schedules. When I asked for reassurance, he offered logic. I learned to read the room before speaking, to phrase my needs like requests for a favor rather than statements of fact. By last Thanksgiving, the distance had become a polite silence that filled every corner of our house. That year, Daniel insisted we host dinner for his family. He framed it as tradition, as gratitude, as togetherness. I cooked for 2 days straight, the kitchen warm and crowded with smells meant to feel comforting. His parents arrived first, then his sister with her husband, then a couple of close family friends. Everyone complimented the table, the turkey, the way the house looked. Daniel accepted the praise easily, like it belonged to him. As we sat down, I noticed the small things I had learned to notice. Daniel's phone face down near his plate. The way he avoided my eyes. The way his hand did not reach for mine when grace was said. The dinner unfolded politely. People talked about work, about travel, about plans for the coming year. I answered questions when asked and listened more than I spoke. The calm before a storm is not silent, it is carefully curated. When plates were cleared and glasses refilled, Daniel stood up. He tapped his fork against his wineglass, smiling. "I just want to say something," he began. The room quieted. This was his moment. "Thanksgiving is about gratitude," he said, "and about new beginnings." His mother nodded approvingly. "This year," he continued, lifting his glass, "I'm grateful for clarity, for honesty, and for the courage to start fresh." He paused, and I felt the air shift. "So here's to a new beginning," he said, his eyes finally meeting mine, "without you." The words landed like a dropped plate, sharp and unmistakable. A couple of people laughed nervously, unsure if this was a joke. It was not. Daniel held his glass steady, waiting. Waiting for tears. Waiting for a scene. Waiting for me to make his point for him. Instead, I picked up my glass. I stood slowly, feeling every pair of eyes move to me. My heart was loud in my ears, but my hands were steady. "Thank you for your honesty, Daniel," I said calmly. "I appreciate it." His smile flickered. "I'd like to add a toast," I continued, turning slightly so everyone could hear me. "To new beginnings that don't require public cruelty to feel powerful." The room froze. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. I kept my voice even. "And to gratitude," I added, "for the people who taught us exactly when it was time to leave." I drank. I set my glass down. And in that silence, I felt something shift. Not triumph. Relief. Because the truth I had been carrying no longer needed protection. As murmurs spread, Daniel laughed sharply. "Don't be dramatic," he said. "This isn't the place." "You chose the place," I replied gently. "I'm just choosing not to disappear." His sister looked between us, confused. His mother stiffened. "Claire," she said, "this is family." "That's why honesty matters," I answered. Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. "We can talk about this later," he said. "There's nothing left to discuss," I replied. "You've made an announcement. I'm responding." I reached for my purse, already knowing where this was going. I'm going to step out, I said to the table. Please enjoy the rest of the evening. As I turned toward the hallway, Daniel grabbed my wrist. Not hard, but enough to assert control. Sit down, he hissed. The room watched. I looked at his hand on my arm, then at his face. Let go, I said quietly. He did. That was the moment people understood this was not a misunderstanding. I walked to the coat rack, the sound of my footsteps unnaturally loud. Behind me, Daniel started explaining. Explaining is what people do when the story stops obeying them. I left the house without slamming the door. Outside, the night air was cold and clean. I stood on the porch for a moment, breathing, and felt the strangest calm settle in. The toast had not ended me. It had freed me. And as I stepped into the dark, I knew the hardest part was already over. The rest would be consequences. I did not get far before Daniel followed me. I was halfway down the driveway when I heard the front door open and his voice cut through the cold air, sharp and controlled, the same voice he used in meetings when he wanted to sound reasonable while forcing an outcome. Claire, come back inside, he said. You're making this worse than it needs to be. I turned slowly, my coat still unbuttoned, my breath visible between us. You already made it exactly what you wanted it to be, I replied. Public. Final. He took a few steps toward me, lowering his voice as if the night itself were an audience he wanted to manage. I didn't mean for it to go like that, he said. I just wanted to be honest. I almost laughed. Honesty doesn't require a stage, I said. You wanted witnesses. His jaw tightened. You're twisting this, he snapped. We've been unhappy for years. You know that. Yes, I said calmly. But I didn't weaponize it in front of your family. The front door opened again. His sister stepped out, pulling her coat around her shoulders. What is going on? She asked, her voice uneasy. Daniel turned to her quickly. Claire's upset, he said. She misunderstood what I meant. I met her eyes. I understood perfectly, I said. He ended our marriage with a toast. She looked stunned, glancing between us. Daniel, she said slowly, did you really say that? He exhaled sharply. It wasn't supposed to sound like that. I watched him carefully. This was the moment he always relied on: confusion, doubt, the hope that someone else would smooth things over. I stepped back, giving the space back to him. You don't need to translate, I said. Everyone heard you. Inside the house, voices rose and fell. His mother's tone carried through the open door, tight with embarrassment. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. We can fix this, he said. Just come back in. We'll talk tomorrow. No, I replied. You wanted a clean break. Consider this one. He stared at me, disbelief creeping into his expression. You're just going to leave? I already have, I said. I got into my car and drove away before he could say anything else. That night, I stayed at a small hotel near the river, the kind of place that smelled faintly of coffee and detergent, anonymous and quiet. I slept better than I had in months. In the morning, my phone was full. Missed calls from Daniel. Messages from his mother asking me to be reasonable. A text from his sister that simply read, I'm so sorry. I answered none of them. Instead, I went back to the house late the next afternoon to collect a few things. Daniel was there, pacing the living room, anger barely contained beneath a layer of forced calm. You embarrassed me, he said the moment I walked in. In front of my family. I set my keys down and looked at him. You humiliated me first, I replied. I just didn't accept it quietly. This didn't have to be messy, he insisted. We could have handled it privately. You didn't want private, I said. You wanted control. He scoffed. Control? You reimagining things. I walked past him to the bookshelf and pulled out a folder I had placed there weeks earlier, long before Thanksgiving. No, I said. I prepared for them. His expression changed when he saw it. What is that? It's a copy of our financial records, I said. Accounts, investments, and the documentation showing when and how money moved. His face drained of color. Why do you have that? Because I stopped trusting words, I replied. And because when someone plans a public ending, they usually think the other person isn't ready. He swallowed hard. You wouldn't, he said. I don't need to threaten you, I answered. I just need you to understand that your announcement didn't catch me off guard. He laughed bitterly. So this was all planned? No, I said. Your toast was. My readiness was earned. He tried to recover, shifting tactics the way he always did. Let's be adults, he said. We'll split things evenly. Keep this civil. Civility starts with respect, I replied. And that ended at the table. He looked at me, really looked at me, as if seeing someone he had underestimated for years. You think you've won something, he said. This isn't about winning, I said. It's about not losing myself. Over the next few days, the story spread through the family, no longer controlled by Daniel's version alone. Questions were asked. Lines were drawn. His mother stopped calling. His sister checked in quietly. Daniel grew erratic, sending messages that swung between apology and accusation. I did not engage. Silence was not avoidance anymore. It was clarity. By the end of the week, lawyers were involved. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted precision. The marriage was ending, and I refused to let it end with the same imbalance it had lived with. As papers were drafted and terms discussed, I felt something unexpected, gratitude. Not for the pain, but for the moment it became impossible to ignore. That Thanksgiving dinner had not broken me. It had revealed me. And as Daniel scrambled to regain footing he no longer had, I understood that the real reckoning was still coming, not with shouting, not with tears, but with consequences that could not be toasted away. The reckoning arrived quietly, the way real consequences usually do. It did not come with shouting or slammed doors, but with envelopes, signatures, and the sudden realization that words spoken for effect can never be taken back. Daniel underestimated that part. He believed the toast was the ending, the punctuation mark that let him step forward cleanly while I faded into the background. What he failed to understand was that endings announced in public create witnesses, and witnesses change everything. When our lawyers met for the first time, Daniel looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but in posture, as if certainty had been removed from the room and he did not know how to stand without it. He spoke confidently at first, outlining how he believed things should be divided, emphasizing fairness, civility, reason. I listened, hands folded, letting him finish. Then my attorney slid the documents across the table. Accounts Daniel assumed were invisible. Investments he believed I had never questioned. Transfers timed suspiciously close to the months he had grown most distant. His voice faltered as he read. This is outdated, he said. No, my attorney replied calmly. It's complete. That was the moment the performance ended. Daniel's tone shifted from commanding to defensive. We can resolve this, he said, looking at me directly for the first time since Thanksgiving. There's no need to drag this out. You already did, I replied evenly. At dinner. Outside that office, the family narrative continued to fracture. His mother stopped insisting this was a misunderstanding and started asking what I wanted. His sister apologized again, this time without qualifiers. Friends who had witnessed the toast reached out, not for gossip, but to say they had seen something was wrong long before it was named. Being believed is a quiet relief. As the legal process moved forward, Daniel's control slipped further. He tried to bargain, to soften, to recast himself as the injured party. It did not work. The records were patient. They did not argue. They simply existed. In the end, the settlement reflected reality, not his announcement. I kept what I had helped build. I kept my dignity. Daniel kept his words, replaying them endlessly in a room that would never clap for them again. The house sold. I moved into a smaller place filled with light, a space that belonged to me alone. The holidays came and went. Thanksgiving returned the following year, quieter, gentler. I cooked a simple meal for myself and a few close friends, people who understood that gratitude is not about appearances, but about honesty. At one point, someone raised a glass and asked what I was thankful for. I thought about the table, the toast, the smile that surprised everyone, including me. I'm thankful for readiness, I said. For knowing when to stand up without raising my voice. Months later, I saw Daniel once briefly, at a mutual acquaintances gathering. He nodded politely. There was no bitterness, no urge to revisit the past. Some people believe closure requires conversation. I learned it requires acceptance. If there is one thing I want you to take from my story, it is this: when someone tries to end you in public, they assume shame will do the work for them. It doesn't. Preparation does. Calm does. Self-respect does. You do not have to scream to be heard. You only have to be ready. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments, like this video, and subscribe for more cinematic stories about dignity, boundaries, and the quiet power of choosing yourself.